and welcome to episode 7 of the must-know blockchain use cases, where we're going to talk about decentralized identity. Before we get into the topic, I first want to invite each of my guests and welcome them to the show and do a brief introduction of yourselves and what company you're with and what you do. So, Chan, let me start with you.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Yan Chen. Actually, I do have an English name. You can call me Ryan. Now I'm based on Hong Kong. Thoughtworks. My title, I'm the technical director in Thoughtworks Hong Kong. Thank you.
Welcome. David?
I'm David Correa. I'm the global DLT crypto and e-money lead here at GFT. I'm based in Barcelona, but I have a kind of global role across the company. GFT is a technology services provider, and we've been working in the blockchain area for just over 8-9 years now, I think, something like that.
Yeah. Yifan?
Yeah, my name is Yifan He. I'm the CEO and the founder of RealDID Technology. We basically are builder of the BSN, blockchain-based service network, and we just launched the RealDID project in China to do the decentralized real name verification, for the government.
Great. We'll get into more of that in a second. I think everyone wants to hear. So in today's digital age, identity is an important element for online banking, for streaming services, even for applications that you use in the workplace. This idea and technology of decentralized identity is something that's new and that people are reading about more in the news, and you have many organizations exploring it. Essentially, what a decentralized identity does is it allows individuals to be empowered by giving them control over their digital identification. So in some cases, this will mean replacing traditional identification documents such as usernames and replacing those with decentralized IDs where people have their own cell-phone applications, which really puts them more in charge of their own information, their own personal information. So in this episode of the must-know blockchain use cases, we're going to have each of our distinguished guests talk a bit more about decentralized identity, some of the technologies involved in how it solves some of the problems with privacy and personal information today. So one prominent project that's been in the news recently is the Worldcoin project. It attracted over 2 million beta users during testing and claims to now have 16 million registered users, which is a pretty big number. So, Chan, I'd like to start with you and get your point of view on, what specific role WorldID played in making this happen, and what are the key differences you see between WorldID and traditional identity verification that we're all used to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, we all know that the trends of generative AI, the co-founder is Altman, right? So he is also the founder of this project. I think this board project, we must go back to its vision. Okay, its vision is to leverage the proof of personhood and cryptocurrency to create a more inclusive and economy system for everyone in the world. Actually, for in our digital world, right? But before we go deep dive into the world project, I think we can take a look back on the vision of Bitcoin. I think everyone knows that it's a pretty big cryptocurrency, right? Let's go back to the vision of Bitcoin. The Bitcoin strives to disrupt the existing banking and the financial system for over probably 15 years, and it still have a long run to go, right? Actually, the Bitcoin definitely create a decentralized digital world, but I don't think the decentralization is equal to inclusive and fairness. Okay, so there are special mechanism, and the Bitcoin is a so-called proof of work, aka POW. I think you guys probably quite familiar with that. That concept means the more work you do, and the more money you will get back, right? So friendly speaking, it does make sense. However, what if several centralized party take all control of the work power? So do you think it's still inclusive and fair? I don't think so, right? So what the difference between them? I mean, the Bitcoin and the World ID. I think the key difference is the World ID adapt a new naming system. In the Bitcoin, we just use the address. This is anonymous address to represent a person. But actually in the World ID, in the underlying mechanism, it aims to make sure the holder of the World ID should be a human. I think this is the big difference. Okay, so go back to the technical details. The World ID actually is an implementation of POP, is a proof of personhood. This is a mechanism that verifies the individual's humanness and uniqueness, in the digital world. So we will know a fact that you can't enable inclusive and fairness without knowing who you should take care of, right? So the World ID is the foundation for the vision in the world project, and it determines a complete new, how can I say, the wealth distribution mechanism, not just by the power, but by the people, okay? And also for the people and of the people. If you know this project's vision is, the humanness is a critical and a valuable property in the digital infrastructure. So I think the World ID is not just the identity, but is a basic foundation in the digital infrastructure to have the world project to achieve their vision. Is a bigger specific role in this project. But go back to your second questions regarding the security and the privacy. What's the difference between the World ID and the traditional identity verification? So I think compared with the two different solutions, the big difference is the World ID is a DID, decentralized identity. It's self-owned and self-sovereign, which means there's no central party to issue any identities. Okay, these key features will provide the privacy. What does it mean? For example, when a platform wants to log in or freeze the identity for some users, it's quite easy in the current platform, right? But in the World ID or in the DID world, you can't do that because every identity are issued by yourself, by the users itself. So you can't freeze any identity. And another thing I must mention is, the World ID have two overcoming two bigger challenges in the decentralized world. The first one is proving the personhood. Okay, this proof who you are actually. And the next one is to protect the privacy in some state-of-the-art crypto skills, you know. So the first one, the WorldID, they developed the privacy perceiving iris imaging device, so-called the orb. Actually, that one is a biometric specific hardware. On the other hand, the WorldID will delete the iris imaging after generating the iris code. And of course, it will separate the ID from the person biometrics data, including their iris code. Meanwhile, the WorldID will leverage some zero knowledge protocol that will allow people to share specific information without disclosing any additional information. Okay. So in a summary, I think the WorldID will use actually uses state-of-the-art cryptographic and transparency to keep the security and the privacy. That's from me.
Good, thank you. David, I'm going to shift this one to you. So two of the most kind of prominent use cases or applications of DLT technology right now are decentralized identity, which Sean just talked about, and then also cryptocurrencies. So Worldcoin effectively leverage both of them in the project. So do you think that they can achieve, mainstream adoption, implementing both applications or as planned, or what challenges do you see in that?
So I think this is a really prominent question, and there's been a lot of speculation about whether a Worldcoin should be used for, let's say, crypto purposes and investment, or whether it should be seen as more of a DID tool and less of a way to invest in some kind of crypto asset. So the way that Worldcoin works is you scan your ID, you go to this big orb thing, you scan your retina, it gives you an ID, and then every week from that point onwards, you can get $2 in your token value, basically. And you have to log into the application to be able to do that. So this is basically incentivizing people to be able to get that token. And people are using it to be able to get the token. But they're not actually being able to make any kind of utility from the ID side of things yet. So it's kind of almost like it's a bit of a strange situation with Worldcoin at this point in time, because it's like a utility coin that in the future will be used for personal or digital identification, maybe by governments or maybe by companies or maybe by whatever. But at this point in time, it's kind of almost a speculation or a kind of a bet towards what it might be in the future if their plan kind of goes well. And their plan and their objectives and the whole reason that they're doing this has changed as well, right? So originally they were doing this because of the fact that Sam really believes in the idea of universal basic income. So he has this vision that once AI well, if AI is maintained as a closed source thing, then there'll be some people that will become incredibly rich. A lot of things will be automated. So a lot of the things that we do on a kind of day-to-day basis, maybe people who work in the tills, even people that are working on Excels, whatever it is, lots of office jobs.
Hosting webinars.
Hosting webinars, exactly. Speaking about stuff. All of this stuff will become kind of automated, and AI will basically be taking over our jobs. And his vision is that there'll be a need for universal basic income. And when this universal basic income needs to be paid out, this will be paid out via your digital identity and an associated crypto that's related to your digital identity. So this is the vision for why there is a kind of crypto related to it, and the reason for why you would need that digital identity. Now, there are actually some open source large language models that are being created. There's one I think called LM360, I think it is. and they are starting to take some kind of, they're starting to take off. So maybe that vision of AI being completely closed source and proprietary is not necessarily the vision that we're going to have in the future. Who knows? I mean, obviously we want to try and protect it from bad actors getting hold of AI, but there is another reason that they want to be able to use AI around digital identity, and the reason around that is obviously around deep fakes, people being able to use AI to be able to fake credentials, fake voice, fake videos, all of those kinds of things. And there are a lot of people that are saying that we need to have the verifiable web of the future, and that verifiable web of the future will be based on SSI identities. And one of the things that I think Worldcoin is kind of going for is being that that identity system of the web of the future. I think that's really probably the crux of what their offering is. So I think that offering is kind of pivoted a little bit towards that, a little bit away from universal basic income. Although I think they do really believe in that. So it's kind of moving a little bit away from the kind of crypto thing. Although people obviously are very excited about the crypto side of things and its potential in the future for payments and stuff like that as well, right? So that's my 2 cents on that. Is it crypto? Is it an identity project? Well, it's a bit of a mix of the two things, right?
Okay, good. So Yifan, I'm going to shift to you. So the BSN has been collaborating with some government organizations in China to promote and launch the implementation of the China RealID project. Could you
RealDID. RealID is from US.
Sorry, RealDID project. Sorry. Can you it'd be interesting to hear some more about some use cases and actual implementation.
I think let me start from the ID. In general, what's the definition of ID? So there's actually 3 layers for any online ID. Okay, let's talk about online ID, not offline ID. Online, the first one is just the ID, which means it doesn't actually link to anyone physically. This is actually has been for past 30 years on the internet, which is a username. Then whoever controls the password prove that ID link back to you. It's only by password. And right now there's a blockchain ID. Whoever holding the private key prove that ID belong to you. That's the first layer. Second layer is like a World Bank. The ID can link back to a person specifically, like the biometric, kind of scan, generate some key, link back to your private key, then link back to the DID. But this second layer is just link. You can prove this ID belong to you as a human being. Okay. Then the third layer is a real name verification, which means this ID, not only ID, is linked back to you as a human being and prove who you are in a government system. Because real name is always about government. Okay, the problem, I know many people say, oh, I don't want government control my ID. But hi, wherever you go, as long as you are required a government issued photo ID, you have to use it. Otherwise, you cannot get a ball on an airplane. You cannot cross the border.
Drive a car.
Drive a car. So, under the reason why the government controls real ID, it's from the birth certificate when you are born. The government always issues the birth certificate to prove who you are. You become a human being, and that becoming is proven by a government issued certificate. That's the start of all real ID. So this is actually 3 layers. So, but there's no way, personally, I think, foreseeable hundreds of years, there's no way you can get rid of the real ID, the real name verification, because still, as long as there's one government controls everything in a country or in the world. I think in 500 years or 5,000 years, whole earth become one government. It could happen, okay. But as long as there's a government controls, they need to make sure they recognize each person. That's how you charge tax, you distribute benefits. there's a social system for government to need to maintain a real name system. So, but that's why for those 3 layers, they apply to different user cases. Like in crypto, it's first layer, it's enough because it's, there's no way, nobody knows who I am. I hold, this wallet, nobody really knows. If I lost my private key, I lost everything. So that's basically the first. Second layer, you basically need to prove you are a human being and you are you. And, if someone steal your stuff, you can prove it's, that guy is not me. Okay. But the third layer is you need to prove to the government who you are in order for the government charge you tax or pay you benefits or allow you to do something legally they can track. This is actually happens in all the country. So that's why, the real name, the China RealDID project, it's about the third layer verification. Okay, that's the first thing. So it must be done by the government. Even one day, in the US, I believe in the US and the European Union, they will launch also the real name DID one day. Okay, because in the US, there's a real ID, which means if you apply for a driver license, if it's not real ID linked, you cannot use the driver license to get on an airplane. Okay, that's a law, Real ID Act, right? And also the European Union just passed a legislation, I think last month. It's basically for the digital ID. There will be a unified digital ID. So for the European Union to manage people real name. So this is actually something every single country is doing. But the decentralized, the RealDID, I think it's an example. Most of the country will do the same because it really gives the government power to protect privacy. Okay, it's not only about China. I think one day European Union will adopt this probably very quickly because there's a GDPR. That GDPR is about, if you don't want to use a website anymore, you can ask them to delete all your data. Okay, including backup. Okay, that's a law. And why the law is designed like that? Because you have to because by the current internet technology, you have to give you privacy data to the website in order for them to serve you. Okay, if there's a technology, you don't need to give the data to the website, and the website still can serve you, then the PGDR will change to that, which means, the website cannot collect any privacy data. Okay, if you do, you break the law. I think the European Union will probably do this long before even China. Okay, so that's why I think the China RealDID project is really very good example, technically and also from a business model, not business model, from the the technology is very, very simple based on the DID technology. Okay, because it cannot be centralized. Once it's centralized, someone still control your DID. It become a big platform. So the RealDID is deployed on BSN China. So the whole thing is right now that environment controlled by 7 entities. It's still permission, but 7 entity means any of the ministry, even as powerful as NDRC and the security ministry, they cannot shut the whole thing down by one ministry. So at least it gave people some protection, not controlled by one party. The second one, the technology is basically, the security ministry verify who you are, then create a DID for you. That DID is created and controlled, basically created by the government, not the BSN, not the RealDID. It's basically the smart contract deployed by them. So, and in this document, but the DID is just a basic address, right? But a link to a document, we call that DID document. It actually stores public keys. It can store up to 140 public keys. So basically, any business, for example, a bank, they say, okay, I I collect the user information and the facial recognition data. I send to the security ministry and they verify everything. Then at same time, the bank also send a public key to the system. Then the security ministry put this public key into the DID document. And the end user or the bank really depends on the bank holds the private key. That's it. That's a technology. But it actually generates a lot of things. For example, the bank now can use for example, if the end user holds the private key, right? When the bank sends any data to the end user, or any other bank or any entity, they want to send a document to this end user, they can actually access the DID document, get the public key, because the DID document is publicly accessible. Then they can encrypt the data sent to the user. Then the user has the private key to decrypt that. So, and another use case is basically you can also use one of the government issued APP to generate your own private key and public key, which means no other people holds your private key or your personal identity other than the government. Then you can log in. Many websites in next 3 years will adopt this login technology. Basically, you can log in by scan a barcode on the website. Then it bring up the app, the government issued app. And in this app, you basically send with your private key. Then it goes through. The website doesn't collect anything from you. Okay, right now, at least they collect the phone number. Okay, because they send you the verification code. But the phone number is a privacy information, because if it's leaked, the people calling you, scam you, do a lot of damage. So, but with the DID address, there's zero information collected. But the government, by international internet law in China, the government still know who you are. So it still complies with the real name verification, the legislation. So that's basically that. So we also develop a services. It's basically now you can use your private key to give a watermark on any document you generate. Then this, for example, on your phone, when you bring up the photo app, it automatically generates the private key and the public key for you. Then scan your face, send to the DID document with a public key. Then when you take picture, every single snap, it actually put a watermark on the picture, of course, through a hash or all kind of technology. Then when you send out this picture to anyone, you always can legally prove the copyright is yours. Right now, there's no technology can do that. And not only you can prove, anyone can actually access your public DID document, get the public key, and verify that belong to you. Because now you have the means. So this is something, we are still testing the DID technology, but I think this is the direction for all the governments to explore and to test. One day, it should government issue the DID. So basically, the logical is for the real name information the government holds, but for any business data, it belongs to the business. So it become a separator, separate the personal information, real name, government control the real name information from the commercial business. So that's, and also give you a tool to put a copyright on any digital binary file, and also give you a tool for anyone to use your public key to encrypt data, then send to you. Only you can decrypt them with the private key you have. So it's something, as personally, I think make a lot of sense to the government, it's still testing. We're still testing all kind of, working with bank, working with ICOEs, working with some NFT platforms. They put the watermark on all the NFTs. So if even you lost your private key, you can still use your ID card to prove that NFT belong to you because a link to you legally linked to your real name verified DID, and the public key is inside. So there's a lot of use cases we are exploring, but I think this is really something all the government will do in next 5 years.
Maybe from the European point of view, so something very quickly on this. So from Europe, so the GFT has been involved in a European funded project for the past, I think maybe year and a half or something like that, run by the EIT, which is a European funded projects from the European Commission, and it's basically building on top of a framework that they have, which is called the European Digital Identity Wallet. So it's the EUDI wallet. And this framework, what it does is it basically defines how the wallets will be for your digital identity, but also how data should be transferred between others. So you can validate the identity of others, but you can also use it to be able to pass data between people for B2B and B2B2C transactions, right? And then GFT have built something on top of it on this funded project from Europe to be able to have a kind of addition to this framework and give it kind of like extra scaffolding for certain use cases. So I think, for example, we're using it in loyalty, but also in like B2B2C transactions as well. And it's called the personal data wallet. So we're going to have more stuff which is going to come out about this, but we're already working with the EU and the funded projects around this, and there is already this framework in place in the EU. I think it's a little bit behind, or maybe on a similar scale. Basically, we're kind of like at a testing phase, so I'm not sure exactly where this is in comparison to China, but it's basically a kind of like a testing phase. And there's also probably almost a connection also into the European blockchain service infrastructure as well, because I know that the European Commission is also involved in that. In the European blockchain service infrastructure, you have a thing called the EU Digital Passport. And the EU Digital Passport is also linked to this digital identity wallet in some kind of way, shape, or form. So I think in the future, those two things will come together and we'll kind of see something a little bit like what you were saying, Yifan, as in the EU Commission and the governments that are part of that are going to be basically using this wallet to be linked to the passport, to be linked to your identity and the real name system. So I mean, so it's kind of similar type system.
Yeah, the most important thing is what the DID can do for real name, verification, is something the traditional internet cannot do. Yeah, so it's really amazing. We didn't even know this 2 years ago, but when we begin to work on this, exploring different scenarios, it's really big. It's I think it will basically change, at least in China, it will change almost everything. Why? Because in China, legally, you have to be real named, to get on internet. That's why every single website requires real name verification. That's a little bit different than the websites outside. That's why you need a real name verification for every single login. So that will change a lot of things.
Yeah. I want to also add something in the DID exploration. Actually, when we build our first project of the DID, we get some requirement from our customer, from our clients. They want us to have a KYC process for the DID. Because we all know that in the digital world, they have just like what Yifan had mentioned, we need to have a real name, right? So why we need a real name? Why do we need a verification or the issue process for a real name? Because there is a triangle, the trust triangle in the digital world. The trust triangle have 3 parties. The first one is the holder, just like the end user. The second one is the issuer, like some government or the company or some institution, right? The last one is the verifier. So this is the trust triangle. So go back to our topic, why do we think the DID do have a real name verification or issue process? Because the trust is for some people, for example, your real name, your some biometric information actually come from the government. So they are the trust center. They need to pass the trust into the DID and put it in the end user's phone or the device. And then the verifier can do the verification without the central party like the government. Yeah, that's the process.
Thank you. Thanks, John. David, maybe back to you on you talked about the various different projects that are going on in the EU, and what do you think is the timeline for that? Because I think a lot of people in the kind of blockchain and Web3 space are talking about what are the applications of blockchain or DLT technology beyond cryptocurrencies, and it seems to me that DID is one of those killer use cases, so that people could go mainstream and people can interact with. So what do you think is the time frame for that becoming mainstream in Europe?
So I think it's going to take a while, to be honest with you. I mean, Europe is a complicated place from a kind of political and diplomatic point of view, because you have so many different countries that are involved in that. A lot of them also are quite aware of kind of privacy and privacy regulations related to that, and digital identities in general. There was quite a lot of pushback around that from certain countries that were inside the EU. I mean, I remember when the UK was part of the EU that they pushed back against the idea of having even a non-digital identity card. And I remember this very much from in the 90s, I think it was, and they did a referendum about it, and it was chose to not do that because it was kind of an invasion on your privacy or your right as a person to be somewhat anonymous. So in the UK, for example, you don't have to hold a passport or anything like that. I live in Spain. Everybody has to hold a a physical identity with them at any one point in time, which is also related to a digital identity. And that's not, this is even before we get to whether this is going to be a distributed identifier and whether this is going to be a DID or a self-sovereign identity. So I think there needs to be, if it's going to be EU-wide, there needs to be a kind of unanimous decision between all of the member states that actually, yes, this is what they want to do. I don't think from a kind of, let's say, from a political point of view, I don't think we're there yet. And I think there'll be some member states which will need a lot of putting, baby steps till we get to that point. I think from a how it can be used in certain countries for certain things, and certain countries advancing forwards with some kind of digital identity before all of the member states do it. I think that will come first. I think there'll be some countries that will put it into, basically they'll make some legislation to allow individual countries to be able to do it, and then individual countries, some which are more kind of prone to pushing forwards and experimenting, will do that first. So I think probably what you'll find is that some of the states, some of the countries within the European Union will actually go forward and push this in places where they're more technologically, let's say, kind of like advanced, right? They don't have this kind of like fear of technology and digital identity. And globally, I think it's anyone's guess, right? I mean, there's about which country or which region will kind of go first. I think there's some places where you have politically and the governments kind of can work quite a lot more quickly, because there's less kind of distance between the governments and regulations, and there's things just work a lot quicker and things can go a bit quicker. So I think probably in those places, and a bit like the places where we see kind of digital assets kind of going quicker in general, I think probably in those places we'll probably see digital identity going quicker too. But that's just my guess on it, really, to be honest with you. It's very hard to see on a worldwide vision how things will be and what the timelines will be. But I would imagine probably, here in Europe, I think we're probably looking more at 10 years rather than 2, for example.
Yeah, it's I mean, for the real name DID, why I think it's a very, very difficult system. Not the DID part, it's the real name part. Because you need a big database. It's controlled by the government with the highest security to verify who you are. Okay, in China, it's 1.4 billion people. They need to verify who you are with, facial recognition data. So that database, any country want to build that database, it costs a fortune. You just think about collecting all the data. In China, there's millions of local policemen, like the birth certificate. You need to go to there, apply for the ID. They need to collect all the data. It takes millions of people 3 decades for that database. So that's why other country, especially for country, don't even have IDs for half of the population. It's really hard for them to do something, even further like DID. But even in China, all the ID, like in the US, it's optional for you to get a driver license, even social security number, all those things. In China, it's same thing. When you're born, you always get a hukou. It's like the family record. You need that you have to do. Okay, without that, you are not even a citizen. But it's optional to apply for the government ID. In China, actually, it's optional. If you say, I don't want the ID, nobody forces you. But you cannot get on the airplane, you cannot go to hotel, there's a lot of things you cannot do because you don't have ID. Just like in the US, if you don't have a social security number and drive license, basically you cannot do anything. You cannot open bank account, you cannot get a cell phone, the real name cell phone, not the burner. So it's get on internet, you need a SP account. So this kind of, that's why, because in every single country, applying for a digital ID is optional. And in China, it's already good. It's like 99% of the people get the ID. But in some country, probably only 80% people. Then if you don't have that kind of database, then there's no digital ID, there's no DID. So that's why for many, many countries, they still trying to achieve a unified digital ID. The DID is further away.
I also kind of wonder whether Worldcoin, a bit like Libra, will kind of force the hand of the governments to think, well, if I want to control the data and the identification of people, and I don't want that to be done by private companies, and I want to be able to build this stuff myself, I better get ahead of people like OpenAI or Google or wherever it is, right? Because if I don't, then they're just going to build it and people are going to use it and they're incentivized to do it, and the technology is good, and there's, I think, what was it, 16 million people who are already, signed up to this thing. So I'm not sure if like Worldcoin is that kind of tipping moment also that's kind of, pushing more and more and more governments to look into this. I mean, I remember that I'm sure Yifan and Kian we've all been speaking about SSID for 7-8 years, maybe, I don't know, something like that, but we haven't seen so much development in the last couple of years, and I think that is a little bit to do with Worldcoin and the kind of direction of travel for some of the governments specifically, right? But I think Worldcoin will probably have that kind of Libra moment, right, of kind of forcing the governments to rethink things and thinking, well, look, if I don't do this, then some kind of private company might come across and do this, and then where's my role? What if I'm not an identity provider as a government and I don't have a digital identity and people are using a different digital identity, then what's my passport value? What's the...
Yeah, but there's no way they can do real name because that's legal.
No.
Yeah, that's actually, that's a different thing. But of course, I mean, Google already have the largest login, operation, right? So many applications. I just log in with my, Google ID. That's it. Now Google actually launched, I think 6 months ago, the passkey. So now the centralized ID basically is you need to input your Google the Gmail address, the stuff. Then it actually redirects you to the Google webpage. Then you put your password, then you pass the verification, then give you back. Now Google actually give you a passkey. It's a locally stored key. Then if you log into a website, it actually do the verification locally. It's much more efficient. It's a little bit like DID slowly, but still, it's issued by Google. There's no, on-chain DID document. It give you, it's half of the DID, but it's a trend. Because
Web 2.5, as they say, right?
Yes, exactly. So Google actually moved pretty forward on this.
Good. Well, I want to thank all three of you for joining the discussion today. I think the topic of DID, I think will gain more attention over time and will advance in various places. So thank you all for your insights today, and until next time.
Thank you.
David.